You're listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the hard biblical questions because we dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
See the light. I wanna see the light.
Hey everybody, welcome. It is a Thursday night and we are back live, sitting here and trying to make sure all of our technology works.
Yes, we are.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Jerry Mitchell. Sitting beside me, it's usual, is the lovely Myra.
Hey, everyone.
The only person in the world brave enough to spend as many years with me as you have. Mm-hmm. And aren't you lucky for doing it?
I am.
Yeah,
I'm blessed.
Yeah. And I'm humble too, right?
That's right.
Oh my goodness. You got to be in a good mood because this next next day is actually Purim. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. And a holiday always puts you in a good mood, right? Or it should. But I have a little confession to make. I am kind of brain dead because we've been working on this other video, or I've been editing the next video that's coming out, and it is going to be Legends, Traditions, and the Doctrines of Men. And the weird thing is, you spend time going over it and making sure you think everything you've got is right, and then you look at the calendar and you say, oh, I've got this to talk about, and your head has to change gears, and sometimes it doesn't really shift and go into the proper gear you want it to go into. You kind of got to hunt for where you want to talk about next, and that's kind of what happened to me this afternoon. I was going over this thing, and I realized I need to really go over my notes and remember what I'm going to talk about tonight. But if I get tongue-tied or if I get backed up, I'm probably thinking about something that I said earlier that probably should have been somewhere else. You know how that is when your brain's just
Trying to do five things
trying to
at
do
once.
too many things at one time. But anyway, that's where we are with that. And if I do make a mistake, I apologize in advance. Don't forget, if you are so interested, you go to givegod90.com. There's videos there for you to check out and all kinds of good stuff there. Don't forget God's Universe, God's Rules, and Tradition to Truth. Those books are available at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, or preferably if you will go to your local bookstore and have them order one for you, that will make them happy as well. We have all kinds of things coming up. As we head towards spring, people, how do I want to say this? People get a little antsy, right? They want something new and exciting. They're ready for spring. It's been a long winter. They're ready for Pesach or Passover. And that's kind of where we're headed next after we get done with Purim. Sometimes I really wonder why we bother having holidays in the United States and having secular holidays when the Almighty provides far more time off if we just follow His.
Yes. There'd be all kinds of time off.
There'd be all kinds of time off. It'd be a wonder we ever got anything done.
I know.
Maybe that's why you're supposed to work for 6 days to make up for all the other days that you don't work.
I guess.
It could be. The chat is open. If you are on chat or on Spreaker, you can, if you have the Give God 90 app, you can actually hit the little balloon cartoon caption icon, and you can actually leave a message while you're live. Or if you're hearing this not live, you can still do the same thing. I'll just get the message later. I just won't be able to address it while we're on the air. And I know some people, they say, I was going to ask this, but I didn't want to sound silly. Well, you know what? If you're thinking it, chances are you got to open that. Chances are, if you're thinking it, somebody else is too. And if all of you are sitting there going, "Well, I don't want to sound silly," it's okay. We'll all sound silly together. Because it might be something I said wrong. I can do that. Okay? When we think about the book of Esther, or the story of Purim, we look at the book of Esther, and that's where it comes from. But you know me, I look at things a little different sometimes, don't I?
You do.
And with good reason. With good reason. And as I have been sitting and reading Esther in the late winter and early spring months of the year for the last several years now, I've began to notice something, and I'm not sure if anyone else has or not. I've never heard this presented this way. And I kind of like being like that. I like being the one that says, "Oh, look, here's something that's kind of similar over here to something else." So, one of the things that we need to put in place as a marker, though, is it was about 500 years before the birth of Yeshua, before the birth of Jesus, that a king of Persia decided that he needed to throw a party. And this party lasted about 180 days, almost 6 months. Now, that's a party. He kind of put Solomon to shame with that one, didn't he?
Did that.
So the king throws this party, and it's really interesting. He had, heads of state from all over. There was, I think, 176 different districts in Persia under his rule. All of those dignitaries came for the 6-month party. The other invited guests were the surrounding heads, or the heads of the surrounding other nations, I should say it that way. And it was just a big to-do. They showed off the best of the best. Everything that they had was the best of the best. And it was such a success that after the main 6-month ordeal was over, they had another party. This time for the help. It only lasted 7 days, so it was a short party. I've heard of wedding receptions lasting that long.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I've heard of weddings not lasting 7 days too.
True.
So, anyway, the king wanted to be appreciative of his servants and all the people that made the big party such a success, that what they did was they threw this party for another 7 days. And is it any wonder that the king became sort of famous? In English, we call him sometimes Artaxerxes, or Xerxes, however you want to say his name. But his Hebrew given name, well, I don't want to say it that way. What he's called from the Hebrew aspect is Ahasuerus. Now, there's kind of a mouthful, isn't it?
It sure is.
But is it any wonder he was so famous, having this big party and then doing what he did for the help? During the party for the servants, there was an incident. And it's an interesting incident that happened because it actually is an important part of the lesson. He sent for his wife, whose name was Vashti. And he said, I need her to come out here and show off her beauty. And Vashti refused. And we want to know why Vashti refused. It's kind of interesting because in the first chapter, in verse 11, it says, "Bring Vashti the queen before the king with the royal crown to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on." Now that sounds innocent enough, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay. Come out here and let us see how pretty you are, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, as usual, there's more to the story than that. Because if you read this in Hebrew, you get a little more detail. Basically, the king's order was, bring Queen Vashti out wearing her royal crown, so the people in the king's court can see how pleasant she is to look at. The implication here, okay, is the only thing she was to wear was her crown. Is it any wonder she said no?
I'm with her on that one.
The king, I don't think he was used to being told no, right?
I don't think so.
He's
either.
king. He has people bowing down to him all the time. He has all of these things going on. He is praised and worshipped out of those 176 provinces.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, a huge kingdom, and nobody says no to the king.
Except for her.
Well, and it didn't work out very well for her.
No.
The king had a little conference with his advisors, and they said, look, king, if you let her get away with this, every wife of every husband in all of your kingdoms are going to refuse their husbands whatever their desire was. Now, we're not looking at a Hebrew culture here. We're looking at basically a pagan culture in Persia. And they're telling him that if she says no and gets away with it, all these other women are going to say no and get away with it too. So the king issued a decree that Vashti would no longer be queen, right?
Right.
We could consider this the vanquishing of Vashti, right? So basically, he cut her off and sent her far, far, far away. Now, we don't know what happened to her. Most people speculate, and here's your speculation warning, that she lived very well off, far, far, far away, where she could do no more harm, right?
Right.
But it sort of reminds me of something. If we look in 2 Kings 18, verses 11 and 12, if you want to read that, it's short.
The king of Assyria took the Israelites away from Assyria. He put them in Halah and in Gozan on the harbor river. He also put them in the cities of the Medes. This happened because they did not obey the Lord their God. They broke his agreement. They did not obey all that Moses, the Lord's servant, had commanded. They would not listen to the commands or do them.
You kind of stumbled over that one, didn't you?
I hope I do better if there's a long one.
There's a couple long ones. The king of Assyria basically took the Israelites and he put them in, he exiled them, he vanquished them, right? And the reason he did this is because the Israelites weren't obedient, just like Vashti. She wasn't obedient, she got put away. The Israelites weren't obedient, they got put away. When we don't listen to our heavenly king, we will be removed from his presence, exiled to someplace you do not want to be. Hey, I see Carol jumped in here. Hi, Carol. Glad to see you. Now, what I'm not saying is that this is anything other than another example that we have where certain things that happen in Scripture repeat themselves to different places or different countries, different people, right?
Right.
But they're similar. The queen didn't obey the king. She was exiled. The Israelites stopped obeying the Almighty. They were exiled. Very similar situation. But we have more. Vashti, when she refused to comply to the request of the king, she actually set in motion a series of events that we remember 2,500 years later. So, a king apparently needs a queen.
Apparently.
Apparently, right? And the call went out to search for someone to replace Vashti. And they began to let it be known that all of the ladies who were of the proper age and of the proper what's a good word? What's a good way to say they were pretty enough?
Right.
Okay, so all of these ladies that were pretty enough were to be gathered together, and they were going to begin the process of searching for a new queen. Well, a gentleman named Mordecai had raised his cousin Hadassah. Now, Hadassah was the Hebrew name of Esther, or better known as Easter in Babylonian. And apparently she was pretty enough. She was apparently a very attractive young lady. And she was chosen by Haggai, who was the person who was put in charge of finding the suitable candidates, right? And making sure that they got their proper training. And Esther was chosen as a possible replacement. Now, during this time, the ladies who were possible replacements went through a series of education on how to look like a queen and how to talk like a queen and how to dress like a queen and how to present themselves like a queen and how, they went to school, basically. They learned which perfumes to use to please the king and which ones you want to stay away from, right?
Right.
He does not like musk. He likes lilac, okay? Honeysuckle he's not a real fan of, okay? Just saying. I don't know what the scents were, but you know where I'm going with it, right?
I do.
There was a lot that she had to learn. She had to study to learn to be queen-like.
Mm-hmm. They usually went to school for about a year.
Yeah. Now, does this sound like something that Paul advised Timothy about like 2,000 years later? Study to show thyself approved? Mm-hmm. Amazing how things repeat themselves in Scripture from the strangest places, isn't it? Esther, she was known to the king, was actually the one who was chosen to replace Vashti.
Right.
So, she went through this course of study. She was pretty enough, and when it actually came down to it, now I'm skipping a whole lot of this story. When it actually comes down to it, they chose her. And it's a good thing they did. We'll see why in just a minute. But while all of that was happening, things don't stop when you're running a country or a nation or a kingdom like that, right?
Right.
Other things have to happen as well. And while all of that was going on, there was a gentleman who was appointed over all the princes of Persia. So all the other kingdoms, if they needed to see the king, they had to go through this fella. He was almost second in charge. And everybody in the whole kingdom bowed down to him except for one person. And the one person who refused to bow down to him was Esther's cousin Mordecai. You think that would cause a little problem? Yeah, it did. Haman became the king's most trusted advisor, almost a second in command. But because Mordecai didn't bow down and worship Haman, Haman began to hate not just Mordecai, but he began to get a bad taste in his mouth for all of the Jews who were living there. And he decided he's going to look for a way to destroy all the Jews living in the kingdom under King Ahasuerus. Now, we're not given a whole lot of information about why the enemy would rebel against the Almighty or why he chose to tempt Eve in the garden. But right here in the book of Esther, we get a little bit of glimpse, a small glimpse, of why evil becomes jealous of good. When good refuses to bow down to evil, evil becomes furious. Just as the serpent looked for a way to tempt Eve in the garden, Haman looked for a way to destroy the Jews in Persia. You know, the serpent ready to destroy humanity, Haman ready to destroy humans, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Mordecai found out what was going on, and he let his cousin Esther know, and she thought about it, said, I don't know, what do I really want to get involved with this? Is it really for me? But finally, after a little bit of convincing, she said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I need all of the Jews you can reach to, Mordecai. I want all of them to fast for 3 days. I'm going to fast. All of my court's going to fast. We're just going to not eat or drink for 3 days. I want to find out what I need to do. Now, she needed to make certain that she's hearing from the Almighty. She's not just acting on her own, right? She says, look, I need to figure it out. Today, we might call that throwing out the fleece like Gideon did. You know, here, you know, if it's wet here and dry here, I know it's from you. Well, that could have been a coincidence. Let's do this again the opposite way. Okay, I get it now. Okay, that's what she's doing. She's saying, I want to make sure that what I'm thinking is what I'm supposed to be thinking, and it's not all me. So she comes up with a plan. Now, what she heard, we could speculate, is the negotiation that leads to the salvation of a nation. You know, it's a little bit like Moses at the Mount Sinai after they had the golden calf incident, as I like to call it. You know, and God says, stand back, Moses, I'm going to kill them all and start over with you. And Moses is like, no, wait. Let's think about this. I'm too old. You have to come up with another way. It's kind of what Esther, I almost called her Hadassah again. It's almost kind of what Esther does when she's negotiating with the king here that we'll see. It's really kind of fun how these stories or these lessons that we see just keep repeating themselves over and over and over again. They just take on a little different, a little bit of a different twist, I guess we could say. Now, Esther takes a chance, okay? It was commonplace for the king and his court, if he was going to accept people to talk to him, they would come and they would stand in line and wait, and he would look at them, and if he wanted to talk to them, he would hold out his scepter, and if you touched the end of the scepter, you could talk to the king. But if he didn't hold out his scepter, you were kind of out of luck, right?
Right.
Now, Esther may have had a different way to approach the king in private. After all, she was the queen. But she chose to go formally to the king. Mm-hmm. She wanted this to be a formal presentation. And we see this in chapter 5, verses 1 through 8. You can stumble over that.
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes. Then she stood
Wait a second. She put on her royal robes, right?
Yes.
Do you think it would have made a difference if she hadn't? If she had just showed up wearing the royal crown?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Start over.
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes. Then she stood in the inner courtyard of the king's palace, facing the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the doorway. The king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard. When he saw her, he was very pleased. He held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther went up to him and touched the end of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What do you want to ask me? I will give you as much as half my kingdom." Esther answered, "My king, if it pleases you, come today with Haman to a banquet I have prepared for you." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so we may do what Esther asked." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared for them. As they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "Now, Esther, what are you asking for? I will give it to you. What is it you want? I will give you as much as half my kingdom." Esther answered, "This is what I want and ask for. My king, I hope you are pleased with me. If it pleases you, give me what I ask for and do what I want. Come with Haman tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for you. Then I will answer your question about what I want."
Okay. So she goes and she speaks to the king. Not a lot unlike the story of Ruth, right? Ruth goes but she doesn't have to bow down to Boaz. You know, she goes in and she serves him a meal, and when Boaz speaks, that's the sign that she can then speak to Boaz. Okay? So again, there is similarities here in Scripture. This negotiation's kind of cool, though. She goes in very formal. And when the king comes to lunch, it's like, what do you I offered you half my kingdom. What do you want? Just lunch. Just come to lunch with me. Just have a meal with me, by your highness. Now he's intrigued. Now he's like, something is amiss, right? I can guarantee you if you came to me and said, let's go have lunch, I'd wonder what was wrong.
Why?
After 30 years, you have to ask, right?
No, you would say why.
Uh-huh. Esther actually becomes quite the negotiator, doesn't she? She's willing to follow the Almighty's instructions. However, the Almighty is about to humiliate Haman. The king had a restless night. He just couldn't sleep. He was tossing and turning. And in the castle where he lived is a book. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, this book contains everything that had ever happened in the kingdom. And the king liked to have this book read to him. It's interesting that everything that was written down, or everything that happened in the kingdom, was written down in the book. You think that's in Scripture somewhere else?
It is.
Do you know where?
Where?
It's actually in Ezekiel Chapter 18. And a short part of this is verses 19 to 24, if you want to read that part.
"But you ask, why is the son not punished for the father's sin? The son has done what is fair and right. He obeys all my rules, so he will surely live. It is the person who sins that will die. The son will not be punished for the father's sin. The father will not be punished for the son's sin. The person who does right is responsible for his own goodness. The evil person is responsible for his own evil. But the evil person might stop doing all the sins he has done, and he might obey all my rules and do what is right, what is fair and right. Then he will surely live. He will not die. His sins will be forgotten. Now he does what is right, so he will live. I do not really want the evil person to die, says the Lord God. I want him to stop his bad ways and live. But a person who does right might stop doing good and do wrong. And he might do the same hated things an evil person does. Will he live? All his good acts will be forgotten. This is because he became unfaithful. He has sinned, so he will die because of his sins.
So where does all of the good things and the bad things, or where are they kept track of? they're in a book. It's really interesting because if we go to actually Revelation this time, chapter 20, verses 11 and 12.
Then I saw a great white throne, and the one who was sitting on it. Earth and sky ran away from him and disappeared. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. And the book of life was opened. There were also other books opened. The dead were judged by what they had done, which was written in the books.
So not only is there a book in Ashkashkarosh's palace that says everything that happened in the palace and around the palace, there's a book in heaven and other books in heaven that, oh my, there's a book in heaven that keeps track of whose name is written, and there are other books that are open that keep track of everything that we've ever done. And we're judged by what was written in the books. You ever hear that in a modern church? Probably not. They like to talk about the book of life. They really like to talk about the book of life. But they really don't like to talk about the other books, because they're not quite sure how it fits in, but it fits into Ezekiel 18. It's how you keep track of who does what. It's how it fits in to Esther. It's how the king kept track of what was done. You see, in Persia, the king liked to have this book read to him when he couldn't sleep. And on the night that the king was restless and couldn't sleep, he had this book read to him, and they went back in time and, oh, by the way, king, you know the fellow Mordecai who sits outside the palace gate? He saved your life once. And the king said, I need to remember to reward him. The next morning, here comes Haman into work, right? Into the palace. All proud, just like it's a brand new day. He knows he's going to lunch with the queen again, right? Because he was there when the king said, "What do you want? Let's do lunch," right? They know they're going to eat. And the king kind of throws Haman a little trick question, I guess we could say. He says, Haman, if somebody did something great for the king, how would you reward them? And Haman said, well, I guess we could put the king's robe on him. Oh, that's a really good idea, Haman. I like that idea. You think we ought to do anything else for him? Well, maybe we could allow them to sit on the king's finest horse. Yeah, that's a really good idea too, Haman. I kind of like that idea. You think there's anything else we could do for him? Well, maybe, Haman said, we could have them led around on this horse by someone, and they would shout how great this person is and how admired they are by the king. That's a really good idea, Haman. I want you to do that. But it wasn't Haman that was going to have the robes put on him. It wasn't Haman who was going to be sitting on the horse, and it wasn't Haman whose praises were going to be sung to the citizens of Persia. In fact, it was Mordecai. They called for Mordecai, and they put the robes on Mordecai. They set him up on the king's finest horse. And guess who gets to lead Mordecai around and shout how wonderful Mordecai is and how much the king admires him? Do you think Haman was seething by the time they were done?
Oh, he was angry.
I think he was beyond angry. He to say that he was ticked is like, you know.
He was so mad you could probably see fire shooting from his eyes.
I'm sure. Now, when the king and when they got back, okay, the parade was over. They get back. The king and Haman went once again to dine with Esther. And Esther, after a little bit of negotiation further, told the king that it was Haman had a plan to kill her and her people because she was considered Jew, right? She was Jewish.
Right.
She was one of the ones that were going to be killed. The king didn't take it well. She said, "King, do you think you can stop this?" Well, in Persia, once the king makes a decree, you don't take it back. It doesn't matter what it is. There is I can't remember where that verse is that says there. I think it's in Daniel. When the king makes a decree, it is forever. Doesn't matter what it is. King says, I can't take it back. Not going to happen. But what I can do is amend it just a little bit. If anyone comes to kill a Jew, then they can also be killed. We'll just make it reciprocal, right?
Right.
Well, that's not where it ended. The king also issued a decree that Haman and his wife and his sons were to be hanged, but not the way you're probably thinking. Haman had prepared a tall post, sharpened at the top. And that was the way they hung people back then. They impaled them, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the legend of Dracula comes from. Vlad the Impaler. He had people impaled on these poles all over the place. That was considered hanging back then. And the king had Haman and his entire family hung on poles, impaled on poles. Didn't end well for Haman, did it?
No.
You see, when evil tries to win, it loses. Every time. We don't often see it, but it will eventually lose. We read in Revelation 20:10, the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophets are, to be tormented day and night forever. Down in verses 14 and 15, we also read that death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death, and whoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. You see, when we look at the book of Esther, it's more than just a story about a young girl who was born for such a time as this. We read about the plan of our Creator to save His chosen people from the evil that surrounds them. When we live the way we're designed to live, and we hear His voice and obey His commands, we are then put into that group of chosen people. The book of Esther is really, really interesting because what we get in those few chapters is a snapshot of the rest of the Bible. All of the, I don't want to say all the important lessons are there, but, all of the biggies are there. You get the book, right? You get the salvation. You get all the other things that go along. You get Genesis, you get Revelation. It's all there. All we have to do is recognize it. I don't know if someone could take the book of Esther and teach the rest of the Bible from it, but I think I did a fair job. I think I covered all the big highlights, right?
I think so.
There's more to this holiday of Purim than just eating what's known as hamantashen, or Haman's ears, right? And dressing up like stormtroopers. And that is, if you've ever seen a picture, a recent picture of Israel during Purim, I don't think it's going to be this year, though, because of the virus. But, every other person is dressed up like a stormtrooper from Star Wars. It's ridiculous. We there's more to this celebration than just dressing up and eating sweet cookies. We remember that evil is once again defeated. We remember that there is a plan and a way that the Almighty has chosen that we don't have to be afraid of the mistakes. We can be given another chance. Just because there's something written in the books, as you read in Ezekiel, if somebody turns around and does what is right, the bad stuff doesn't get mentioned. But if somebody who's been doing good does something bad, the good stuff doesn't get mentioned. You know, when the Almighty, who already knows what's in the books, you know, when he looks at the list, we really need to make sure which list we're on. And, you know, we hope that we have been trying to live properly so that none of the bad stuff you do gets mentioned. The best way to do that is simply live the way you're designed to live. And if you need help with that, as I continue to say, you can go to givegod90.com and start looking at the first 3 pages. You will get a 90-day plan on how to slowly turn the mess that your life is in all around and begin to live the way you're designed to live. And after the end of 90 days, I've not heard anybody who went back and just didn't keep doing it. So there may be some out there, I just haven't heard. There may be some people out there who read it and went, well, I'm already doing this. Mm-hmm. But are you doing it properly? That's the question. We think about the holiday of Purim, and we get tied up in the traditions. We get tied up in the legends. But what we need to be tied up in is what's actually written and how it relates to other things that are going on in Scripture. So I hope now you know that when you read Esther, you're not just reading one book. You're basically reading the entire Bible, right?
Right.
So if you want to read the Bible in one sitting, read the book of Esther. Mm-hmm. It's easy enough to do, okay? I hope that that has certainly been something you were willing to spend time with tonight. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Don't think so.
Don't think so? Okay. In that case, we will see you Monday morning.
Yes.
So, till then, many, many blessings, everyone. Stay safe.
Good night.